want to say thank you to everybody for hopping on here today. We're very excited to have Brian with us today for our Highlander Wisdom webinar series, talking about digital empathy. We're really excited. I've been following Brian's work for a while, so I'm excited to hear him talk and learn a little bit more about him. So I'm going to turn it over to Brian, and then I'll come back on at the end to help answer some questions when we open it up at the end. So, Brian, it's all you.
Sounds good. All right. This works for me. Thanks, everybody, for jumping in. I representing a little bit today. So I graduated in 03. So I was 99 to 03. Played hockey there at Radford. I live currently in Northern Virginia. And I'm going to go through I have a presentation, but I've tweaked it and customized it a little bit for you guys. Talk a little bit about my background, or a little bit about things that I've found successful, and then also hopefully bring in your questions. So you should be able to see the Q&A, the questions. So feel free to bring in your questions. Also, I can see the chat. I do a lot of these, a lot of webinars, a lot of live streams. And when I say a lot, I've done over 3,500 live streams since 2014. So I'm pretty good at multitasking and kind of bring you guys along. So rather than like sharing the entire screen of slides and you guys not being able to see me, I'm gonna kind of do this a little bit differently, but hopefully you guys will like it. And I'm gonna throw this up, so now we're gonna be able to see my slides, and you're gonna have me there in the corner. If you're on your phone, I know some people are on their phone, you might have to go up and say, hit the button that says fit to screen. I know sometimes for people that can be slightly annoying in that sense, but hopefully you guys can see this, and then we can kind of go through the slides and hopefully see what we can cover here. And so, oh, hold on one sec. Why is that not working? Oh, see, this is why when you use technology, the only guarantee with technology is that something might go wrong. What in the world? All right, so let's see. All right, give me one sec. All right. Oh, there's my daughters. All right, there we go. Now we should be cooking. So let me go back to fit slide. All right. All right, so you guys should be able to see the, what is that? So the slides there on the screen, hopefully that works for you guys. So I wanted to kind of just give a little bit of background on myself, and then we can kind of go through some of these things. So this is some pictures of me at Radford. I was in the Kappa Delta Rho fraternity, as well as played on the hockey team there at Radford. That's a picture of me in front of the library. I know so much has changed. And then the picture with the yellow Jeep that you guys see up there, that's actually this morning. So I wanted to show it. I have the still loud and proud with my Radford license plate there. And for me, my career and a lot of the things that have transcended since Radford has been pretty amazing. It's been a wild ride. I think a lot of people can say they have a unique background, and I'm definitely one of those that did. And I went to Radford. I grew up in Virginia Beach, and so I went to Radford for a business information systems was my focus. And so one of the things that I think when we're looking at this environment we're living in today, and really the world that we're evolving with, one of the things I think we have to kind of think about is how does this all work together? And so I think my proudest moment, or my proudest aspect of myself, is that I'm a dad of 3 girls. So these are my 3 girls there. I got Chloe, Kinsley, and Logan. And this slide is an interesting one because I've still been using it, although I know our current times in lockdown, and I've actually not talked to anyone other than my daughters in person since March 11th when I came back from one of my events. And so I talk a lot about the changing in the times and where we're at today, and it kind of fits into the digital empathy conversation in the sense of saying we have the ability to tell our story. We have our ability to put ourselves out to the world, unlike any time in history before. And so when I think about this, when I think about what our opportunities are, part of it comes down to how can we leverage what we have available for us to hopefully tell our stories and put ourselves out there. And so one of the things that I think we have to look at or kind of address is that although I do believe this is the greatest time in history, we also have to kind of just realize that we're inundated with information and so much news, and especially right now. And so for me, one of the things that I talk about a lot is that I believe there's a lot of great people doing great things, but most of us don't know about that because unfortunately right now we have all of this noise, and then we have bad news and we have fake news, and well, right now we have Corona news. And so when we look at all of these things, the place that I kind of go with this conversation, and I have a full keynote program that I've given around the world on this topic, is I call it digital empathy. And really what I mean by that is, from an empathy perspective, we have this unique ability today to be able to listen and learn and be able to feel what someone else feels, no matter where they're at in the world. I was actually born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and my total exposure to the world in Pittsburgh was really just Pittsburgh and Virginia Beach, because Virginia Beach is where we went on vacation. And so, for me, that was my exposure to the world. My 10-year-old daughter today has had Skype sessions with her friends, or with one of my good friends in Australia, and she could tell you what Vegemite is, right? And so if we think about the changing times, we have this amazing ability to not only tell our story, but listen and learn from people around the world. And I can tell you, for me, and I'm gonna kind of go through a little bit about this and how it connects to my story. I definitely was one of those ones that, struggled through high school. I always say that, 4 of the best years of my life were definitely at Radford, but not from most of the time, not from a school perspective, but more of what it opened up my mind to the world. And so part of that also kind of comes into my kind of first journey into what I considered digital empathy. And so this is actually me. After I left Radford, I got a job working for the Department of Defense in cybersecurity. And so it actually was, I didn't take any cybersecurity classes at Radford at the time. I don't even believe they offered them, as cybersecurity really wasn't something that was a trend in 2003. And so I took this job, and it was an overnight help desk job. I was working overnight. I had to learn this new program. And about 6 months or so into that job working for the government, I had just got my security clearance. The boss, our boss came in, and he came into our help desk. There was probably about 12 of us, 14 of us. And he said, raise your hand here if you want to go to Korea on Monday. And I happened to raise my hand first. And I put my hand up first, and he asked me, he's like, do you have a passport? I was like, no, but I've been on a cruise to the Caribbean. And he was like, okay, we're gonna have to get you that. He's like, you think you're gonna be able to handle this? And I said, yes. And so I ended up going to DC, getting a same-day passport, flew to Korea that very next day, the longest flight I've ever been on, 13 and a half hours to Seoul, Korea. I had to get on a high-speed train down to the military base down there in Daegu. And I can tell you, I spent every night learning what I was supposed to be teaching the U.S. military members that were over there. And it was one of the tools that we were working on. And each night I would go back and I would try to figure out what I needed to teach for the next day. And then I would teach it and do the same thing. And when I flew back from Korea, I had landed in Atlanta and had actually turned on my BlackBerry, which kind of puts a little bit of the time on there. And there was a email from my government lead to my boss. And the email in summary pretty much just said, if Brian's the one that is delivering these training courses, we would love to increase the amount of courses that we are able to support. And so by the time I got into the office, I was kind of promoted 4 levels above where I had started. I got to build a team, and I ended up working there for about 9 years, growing a team of about 32 engineers and different groups that lived around the world. We taught 4 training courses a week, every week. I traveled actually to a total of 52 countries during that time. I did 3 trips to Iraq, 2 to Afghanistan, and this is actually me in Saddam Hussein's palace, playing poker and sitting on the throne. And so interestingly enough, though, for me, one of the things that this taught me, or this kind of exposed to me from the world perspective, was a lot about some of the key characteristics that I look at for success today. And part of that comes down to what was my job. And so I like to say I had one of the hardest jobs in history when it comes to collaboration, because my job was to get the US Army to share cybersecurity policies with the US Navy, or to get the Marine Corps to share with the Air Force. And so it was a very interesting time. And for me, I loved the travel. I got to travel around the world, which was something that I truly treasured. And throughout my travel, a lot of people would ask me, and still to this day, a lot of people ask, what was your favorite country, or where's the places that you've been? And so I like to share this, is that actually the favorite country I've ever been in the world, I've actually been to 76 countries now, as of right now, was actually Bahrain. And I use this map because most people aren't familiar where Bahrain is, but Bahrain is a small island off the coast of Saudi Arabia and Qatar. And I've been there multiple times working with our US military. But one of the things that I found amazing is that I've been to the Middle East now roughly almost 40 times, 40 individual trips. And I fell in love with the culture and the people there in the Middle East. And I started telling that story to people. And not only were they amazed that my favorite country in the world was Bahrain, but that was something that they didn't really understand. And so I just started to write. And I don't know if you guys, if you're around my age or older, you'll recognize this blogging platform. It's actually called Blogger. As you might be able to tell, I was really popular on Blogger. I have that's 5 followers. One of them is myself. One of them is my daughter's mom, and 3 of them have no face. So very interesting times. But for me, I was so excited, and I got back. I wanted to tell this story, and really let people know what was going on. And so what happened was I flew back. I was working with my government contractor lead, and I said, hey, I want to write this story about my point of view on the Middle East and my exposure to that world. And I can tell you, when I got back, the comment I got back from my government lead at the time said, Brian, I love what you're doing. I believe that you have a lot of value to add, but you write like you talk, you share too many stories, your experiences, which are not really what our customers want. And funny enough for me, like telling stories, putting yourself out there, sharing experiences is actually what has got my success now. And so when that happened, it was a real big kick in the gut. I can remember, I actually didn't blog for about 8 years. For me, it was just something that really, I struggled with. But now over the last 7 years, these are the brands that I've been able to work with: the Super Bowl, IBM, Adobe, the UFC, US Sailing. And so it's been an interesting journey for me since my days there at Radford, and as I've kind of grown in my career. And part of that was, this statement that, Brian, we love that you want to blog, but, you write like you talk. And one of the key things that I've learned, since leaving Radford, and I can, guarantee it's the reason for my success is, when I look at my path, one of the things that I've been very fortunate about is that I've been okay at being unapologetically myself. And so when I look back and I look at this kind of journey, and I'm definitely a mama's boy, one of the key characteristics I look at for success today in 2020 is your ability to be yourself. But beyond just your ability to be yourself, we also have to understand that we have to kind of live in a world and a space that embraces and understands what online, social media, what virtual means. And so I know most of us are at home at the moment. We're on social distancing, and we're kind of being forced into this virtual arena and virtual world. But I always like to tell people that social media and what we do online will never replace a handshake. But if we do it well, if we work hard and we understand the importance of what we're doing and sharing online, it will actually give us the opportunity to have more handshakes. And what I like to say is turn those handshakes into hugs. And what I mean by that is, when we look at social media or online, or the Zoom calls or whatever we're currently doing in this current environment, this is where it's our job to put ourselves out there. And so it doesn't matter what your industry is, but you could be an entrepreneur, you could be a manager, you could be working a local 9-to-5. When it comes down to it, we all have one thing in common, and that is every person today, right now, is in the business of trust. Building trust, maintaining trust, scaling trust. And I would actually argue that's probably the hardest one, is scaling the trust that we put out to the world. And so this is an interesting, dynamic that we're kind of living with and kind of rolling with, hopefully, at these current times. And not only do we have to build trust and maintain trust in this virtual online world, but we have to connect those dots. And on top of that, we have a very interesting dynamic in the workforce. As for the first time in history, we have 5 generations in the workforce. We have the traditionalists, the baby boomers, the Gen Xers, those pesky millennials, which is what I am, and what my daughters are, Gen Z, or we could say those that were born onto Netflix. And so when we look at that, and I would love, for those that are watching here on the webinar, if you have the chat up, I would love to hear, maybe which generation you are. If you don't want to say the generation, maybe what year you graduated would be perfectly fine. But if we look at that, changing of times, and we look at this, massive, separation. There we go. I see Brittany said millennial. Ellen said boomer. All right, I love it. And so when we look at all of this dynamic, these generations, it's extremely hard not only to build trust, but it's extremely hard to collaborate and cross generations when it comes to working together, pushing things forward. We have Gen X, class of 91. We have Caitlin's a millennial, class of 2007. Love it. I love it. So yes. So even in here, we have Gen X, baby boomers, and millennials in the actual webinar as we're going here live. And so when we start to think about it, and one of the things that as I started my speaking career, and I now travel around the world speaking around different topics, one of the biggest topics that I talked about when I worked at the government and also when I left the government was what I call the millennial mindset, which really meant it's not about what year you were born, rather your ability to embrace digital change and the importance of collaboration. And so when we look at where we're at, and we're looking at this kind of landscape as we move forward, we now have to figure out how this all works together. And so one of the things that I kind of look at this on is that the times have definitely changed. And so my dad, one of the things that my dad always instilled in me was that the importance of a handshake, and the importance of telling your story, and the importance of your name is bond, and making sure that you understood and valued your reputation, and if you said you're going to do something, you did something. And he always said, let your work do the talking for you. And I'm here to tell you that all of the things my dad said were all still true to this day, except for the last one. And so when I look at where we're at right now, one of the things that I help businesses, I help leaders do, is I help them put themselves out there to the world and tell their story. And the big piece of that, and really probably the number one piece for me, is that this is what I stress with people, is that we need to give people access to us while shining the light on others. And this is something that is extremely important in today's very interesting world that we're living in, because we think about empathy, we think about storytelling, we think about social media or video. A lot of this comes down to I don't want to brag about myself, or I think about it a lot with the leaders that I work with. They're like, well, Brian, I don't want to come off as though I'm pounding my chest saying, look at me. And so when the difference between that world and kind of the way that you can make this happen is that you have to tell people why you do something, how you do something, and bring them along on your journey. It's a lot less about telling people how amazing you are and what you do that they don't. Rather, it's how can I allow people in so that they can come along and learn with me. And so this is an interesting situation, because we are currently living, without question, in the on-demand world. And so this is a picture of me as a little boy in Pittsburgh on my phone. The other picture there is my daughter, Chloe, on her iPhone, more than likely probably watching YouTube videos of kids playing with Play-Doh. That's what she does. I try to tell her that when I was a kid, I just played with Play-Doh. I didn't watch YouTube videos of kids playing with Play-Doh. But that's what she does. And I think when we look at it today, and this is a perfect example with COVID, is that this is an interesting time because excuse me, because we want things where we want it, how we want it, when we want it. And so in that sense, and in that whole arena, we have to start figuring out, okay, how does this all work for us? And then where can we move forward? And so the one thing that we have to shift from is it's no longer letting my work do the talking for you. And this will probably be the only hard truth part of this that I give throughout this webinar, is that there's something important to say, is that if you are waiting and believe that you're just going to let your work do the talking for you and you're going to stand out from the noise, not only are you not going to stand out from the noise, but you're going to get passed up on the next promotion. You're not going to be able to get that next client or customer that you want, because there's so much noise right now, so much going on, that we have to be the ones telling our story. There's nobody better to tell our story than ourselves. And so this is where I kind of walk this into empathy and really how we can move the empathetic conversation forward. And really, when we think about empathy, and I like to say empathy starts with me. When we we look at this and say, hey, we want the world to be more empathetic, more often than not, that's like saying, hey, we want to change the world, right? It's a very overwhelming idea. And the thing about that is we don't know where to start. And so when we say that we want the world to be more empathetic and we understand the importance of empathy, we also sometimes get handcuffed and say, well, where do I start? How do I help make the world a more empathetic place? And I'm here to give you that answer. And the answer is we have to allow people to be empathetic towards us. And so if we think about it from like the holistic high level, if every one of us tells our story and allows people in to be empathetic to us, to understand who we are, where we came from, why we do what we do, together we would combine to make the world a more empathetic place. And this is essential, because I do believe that we are a world full of good people doing good things, while at the same time, there's bad news and fake news and so much running over. And so this does require a change. It requires a change in our mindset. It requires a change of what we think about online. And interestingly enough, for the last 4 years, I focused a lot on the change, helping people see the change. Well, what COVID has done is it's kind of forced us to change. It's forced us online, forced us to be on video, forced us to use tools and collaboration, since we are not able to connect and be offline. And so when we look at that and we start to think about this change, one of the places I want us to think about, or one of the places that I like to kind of hammer home on when it comes to putting ourselves out there and embracing that change, is that I truly do believe that the future of marketing, and marketing ourselves as well as our business, is relatability. And a good example of this is that people buy from people they like. We've heard that for the longest while, but people just don't buy from people they don't like. And if you think about it today, think about your most recent purchases, more often than not, the person that helped you buy something was someone that you could relate to, right? Like, we don't go fly into a new city and check a billboard to decide where we want to eat. More often than not, we post on Facebook and say, hey, everybody, I'm going to Austin, Texas. Can you give me a recommendation of where I should eat? Or even the concept of influencer marketing and the idea that, the people that influence us are people that can relate to us, right? Like, for me, like, I love, Matthew McConaughey. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys believe that Matthew McConaughey drives a Lincoln. I do not. And so Matthew McConaughey can't relate to me. And so when I was looking for a new vehicle, I sure was not going to take the advice of Matthew McConaughey, but I was going to go on YouTube and Google, parents, Jeep owners of parents, right? And watch videos of people that were parents, but also drove a Jeep. And that's one of those things when we look at it today, is that it does come down to that relatability and our ability to connect with people. And so one of the places that we can start to be more relatable, and one of the places that we can kind of start to make a difference in our business, in our storytelling, building our personal brand, is the difference in the language and the words that we use. So many people are amazing offline. When we get to know, if we were hanging out at a local restaurant, or we were connecting offline, we tell stories, we're engaged, we have conversations. But for whatever reason, so many, when we move online, instead of that same kind of dynamic, we're usually talking at people. And so when we post things, we'll say, this is what you need to do, or I wish everyone started doing this. And in this current climate and the current world we're living in, nobody wants to be told what to do. No one wants to be told that they're wrong. We all want to feel like we're a part of something. So simply changing our narrative, changing the way that we present ourselves, as well as the things that we're sharing makes a massive difference. And so rather than saying, hey, I wish everyone would do this, you change the language to say, I think this is something we should all do. I think this is something this is a problem that we have. And so if you start using more we's and less you's, it definitely changes the dynamic of how we build conversations online. It allows us to really drive a different type of conversation. The next piece that I believe, and maybe probably the most important aspect, is that we need to give people access to who we are, what we're about, giving them access to understand what connects with us and how our whole world kind of comes together. And that access is extremely important. And that's kind of where I take this into transparency and vulnerability and the idea of moving this to a different direction. And so I'm going to switch into the video here just to kind of talk this point through. And I think when we look at this, to make the world a more empathetic place, for us to stand out, for us to be ourselves, to people to give access into who we are, we have to start shifting our narrative. And part of that comes down to just giving people access. And it also means understanding how to be transparent and vulnerable. And so for me, I was diagnosed ADHD at 31 years old. So at 31, I was diagnosed ADHD. Through that story, they actually, the doctor had kind of, told myself and my mom that, I probably should have been diagnosed at 14, and my struggles through, school for concentration and focus was very difficult. And my life changed when I was diagnosed, and I'm still medicated today. And I know for some of you are like, oh, that's why he's talking so fast and moving his hands. But no, I've been this way ever since I was born. But when we start to look at this trend, we start to look at the world we're moving to, one of the things, and I think the virus has probably proven this more so than anything else, we are much more alike than we are different. And in most cases, especially in the digital world today, we connect with people that are more like us. And I can tell you, if you would have asked me 5 years ago if I would admit or tell anyone that I was diagnosed ADHD and still taking medication, I would have said, you're crazy. There's no way I would be doing that. But as we've kind of learned and evolved, we've realized that we all have vulnerabilities, we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses. And so in this journey, and one of the things that that I've been very blessed with is that the more I've allowed people in, the more I've talked about the things that I've been going through, the more my success has grown, the more my business has grown, the more opportunities that have been presented to me. And if you think about it, part of that is because we don't connect with people always just on what they do. And a good example of this is, my dad told my brothers and I that we needed to learn golf, right? Golf is done on the golf course. And I played golf through college. I actually see one of my fraternity brothers from Radford, Jason Miller's in there. He said, we diagnosed that in 2000 at a chapter meeting. You're probably right, Jason. My fraternity brothers probably knew I was ADHD back then. But I was told to learn golf because business was done on the golf course. And then I remember, graduating and going, onto the golf course with people through business. And I realized nobody talked about business. You talked about your life, you talked about your spouse, your kids, talked about sports, talked about things you're passionate about. And then we got off, the 18th hole and we realized, oh yeah, what do you do for a living? Oh, we should connect. We probably can do some business. And so when I look at online, when I look at digital, and this is especially in the LinkedIn space more so than anywhere else, is that we have to start treating LinkedIn like our golf course. It's not about just what we do. It's not about just our resume or a CSV. Rather, how can we, tell people and let people in to who we are and build and strengthen those relationships in that way? And so when we look at this kind of transformation, for me, it's been an interesting ride, right? It's been an interesting time, as I've evolved, as different things have happened. And so I get to work with brands of all sizes, different leaders. Like I said, I travel around. I do about 60 speaking gigs a year. I host a couple of podcasts. But part of that whole thing what I'm helping, not only brands do, but also leaders do, is this idea of putting yourself out there. And so I talked a little bit about being vulnerable and the importance of being vulnerable by sharing the ADHD. The second piece of this is transparency. And I want to clarify that being transparent is not the same as oversharing, right? If you're oversharing, that's sharing everything you eat and putting everything out to the world, airing your dirty laundry, complaining about everything that's going on. But what transparency is it's an authentic window into who you are. And it allows people to build trust faster or not trust you faster, right? And I kind of have a saying that I say, if you suck offline, you're going to suck online. So, if you're transparent and you're not a good person, we're going to be able to figure out that you're not a good person faster. But if you are a good person and you are doing great things, the more transparent you are, the faster that trust and those relationships are able to be built. And we're seeing this today with people, being able to, we're much more open to sharing our home office and understanding the different things that go on, in our lives, being able to, bring people in and talk about maybe topics that we haven't in the past, where we're able to connect at that deeper level. And so when we look at this kind of change and we look at digital empathy and our ability to relate and connect with people, it starts with our being ourselves, right? Be yourself is a key aspect of this journey, and the idea of just owning who we are. And for me, that all happened, I remember it was November 1st, 2013. And on November 1st, 2013, my mom had actually called me out and said, you don't look like you're having a lot of fun on social media or online. She's like, are you being the same person that you are offline? And I was like, of course I am, Mom. Yeah. And she's like, I don't even see you're not even wearing a hat in your profile picture, which is kind of, a hat has been my signature since day one. And I remember getting off there and I remember writing on my mirror in my bathroom, be yourself in real big letters. And from that day forward, I've made a commitment to, I'm not trying to be something else when I'm online. I'm not, worrying about how other people are going to take this. Rather, I'm telling my story, letting people in. And I think that to me was a massive change. I like to say, I had maybe 2,500 followers on social media at that time in 2013. Now I have close to 500,000 followers on social media in that way. About 90% of my leads for my business are generated through social media or video or podcasting. And a lot of that has to do with that ability to allow people in and to be unapologetically yourself. And so in this kind of transformation into the digital space, and I would love to answer your questions, so feel free to, I see there's one question in there, but we'll feel free to bring your questions in as well as we kind of pull this together. But one of those things that I love to kind of hammer home or to express when it comes to this is that if I had to give probably the number one advice that I could give in this journey is to work very, very hard on being self-aware. And what I mean by that is, self-assessment, right? So understanding what you're good at, what you're not good at. What are you spending your time on? What are the things that you want to do? A lot of the clients that hire me to do coaching, the first thing we start with is, what does success look like for you? And then we ask, what are the goals that you want to be able to measure to make that success happen? And then we take the third step and say, okay, where should we start focusing our attention to accomplish those goals that are ultimately going to lead us to success? But I will tell you, I firmly believe that collaboration, not only amongst our peers and part of being groups and associations, collaboration is the magic, right? Collaboration is the fuel and the foundation for innovation. But for us to collaborate, and we can use the old adage, we are greater than me. For us to be part of a greater we, for us to be part of a great team, for us to be part of a great association, great event, great company, we first have to be the very best individual self that we can be. And so when I look at things like empathy and our desire to be more empathetic, one of the things that we have to look at in this space and in this journey is, what can we do ourselves to not only allow people in, but to become very self-aware in our strengths and in our weaknesses. And this has been something that's been a struggle for me. And I now have a team that works with me, that my speaker agent and my assistants, my content team. And a lot of that just had to do with the fact that, hey, these are things that I'm good at, and these are things that I like doing, and these are things that I'm not very good at, right? And by kind of being self-aware, it allowed me to do something that I think is extremely powerful. And here's that magic, is that if you can know what you don't know, if you can write down what you don't know, because when nobody's perfect and we all don't know a whole list of things, if we can assess and embrace what we don't know, and then surround ourselves with people that know what we don't, that's how we start to build great teams. That's how we start to understand how we can move the needle forward. And so when I look at things, I've done over 3,500 live streams online. I've done a lot with podcasting and video. And a lot of people are like, Brian, well, where do I start? Like, well, how do I have a story to tell and I'm willing to put myself out there, but where do I start? And I can tell you, this is one of the mistakes that I think most people make, is that most people try to start where they believe their audience is. Like, oh my goodness, I think most of the people that I want to reach are on YouTube, or maybe they're on Instagram. And we try to tell our stories there. And here's the thing, if you're trying to put yourself out there, which is already very scary, very awkward, very different, and you're doing it somewhere that you don't really understand, you're adding variables and things that are going to make you not want to do it, right? And so my advice is that to start telling your story, the best place to start is where you are most comfortable. For me, YouTube and video intimidated me so much because there was thumbnails and there was tags and SEO. I didn't really understand that whole world, although I was in the social media space. And it wasn't until live video came and we had the ability to live stream from our phone. And for me, it was the medium that allowed me to tell my story to the world. It allowed me to be myself, allowed me to kind of roll with mistakes and things that were happening along that path. And so for those that are out there, one of the stats that we've heard, and it's, this is increasing, is that, and this is from Cisco, 82% of all internet traffic by 2021 will be video. And so video is coming. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. And the thing about video, especially live video, that is so valuable is that you can't fake it. You can't sell unicorns and rainbows, although I do have a rainbow pillow. But you have to be able to put yourself out there. You have to be able to admit what you don't know. You have to be able to own who you are. And so when I talk to people about where they start, I always say, if you want to get better at video, and video right now intimidates you, rather than calling your 5 friends this week, I want you to FaceTime your 5 friends, or Zoom or Skype, whatever it may be. Start getting used to seeing yourself on video. Right now, a lot of us, are using Zoom video, and we're getting used to the idea of like looking down at our camera and realizing that we have to hit the mute button, all of those type of things inside of different calls. But it's all about that gradual approach. And I can tell you, I've launched the very first Facebook Live, Instagram Live streaming for some small brands you might have heard of, like IBM, Dell, Samsung, the Super Bowl, SAP, UFC, Applebee's. And I've helped all of them put their brand on live video. And one of the things that I found most interesting, if it was IBM or if it was the UFC, I always got the first comment I got after our very first live video was, wow, it's really that easy just to press the button? Like, it's that easy? Like, it's just a matter of putting it out there. Because here's the thing, and I would love to open this up for questions that you guys might have, or stories or things that you're interested about, or maybe even things that I've learned along the way, or I can share some Radford stories as well. When we look at this, the world we're in today, everyone can show up to a webinar, everyone can read a book, everyone can listen to a podcast. A lot of people are going to do that, and then a lot of people are going to take notes, a lot of people are going to be inspired. And for me, that's been a big thing, and that's actually part of like my upcoming book. Part of one of the things that I work really hard on is that we can all listen, we can all learn, we can all take notes. But here's the thing: very few people are going to take action. Very few people are going to say, "Hey, I learned this, I understand the value of this, and now I'm going to try it out." And those that are willing to take action today are the ones that are going to be successful. And so for me, like my book, which I told you I'm a hat guy. So my book is called Press the Damn Button, which will be out this fall, hopefully, depending on how it's impacted in the coronavirus arena. But it's called Press the Damn Button. And the reason Press the Damn Button exists is I've been talking around the world giving presentations, and I would have people come up to me after, a year later and say, Brian, I took all these notes, you inspired me, you motivated me, I understood the value. And I got back to my office, and then I was inundated with email. And then I realized I wanted to do it, but I didn't have the right technology. Then I got the right technology, and my hair wasn't done. So I waited till the next month when I got my hair done. But then once I got my hair done, I was worried about the holidays. And I understand, I'm inspired, I'm motivated, and hopefully after I hear you talk this time, I'm gonna take action. And I was getting so frustrated. I was like, I just wish you would press the damn button. And if we think about this and we tie this back down into digital empathy and where I believe we are going as a culture, there's a lot of bad news out there. There's a lot of fake news out there. There's a lot of people doing bad things. And yes, that still exists. But I firmly believe the more people that are willing to tell their story, put themselves out there, share who they are, allow people in to who we are and what we are about, the more good stories we're going to have. And we're going to start spending more time amplifying those good stories, because we all know right now, giving more attention to fake news and bad news, all that does is amplify that. But if we want to change the world and we want to make a difference, it's up to us to put ourselves out there. It's up to us to tell our stories. And I'm living proof. In 2013, I shifted and I started being much more vulnerable, much more out there, talking with people, not talking at people. And not only my career, my business, my personal life have transformed, have transcended. I've been able to travel the world. My goal is to hopefully get to 100 countries before I turn 45. And that connection to me wasn't because I was doing something magic or I was doing something that nobody else was doing. Rather, I was willing to take action. I was willing to press the damn button and try things and move the needle forward. And I will kind of wrap this up by saying, the coronavirus time is a very interesting one. For me, in my career over the last 17 years, I've spent 13 of those years working from home. So working from home has been a massive part of my career and my business. But I also I've been traveling over 40 weeks a year, every year as well. And so this lockdown has been very unsettling for me because I'm just so used to traveling. I've actually been more weeks this year than I have any year since 2010. But I'm a big believer in that, yes, we will not go back to the normal of the past. But I think we have a very special opportunity that we each individually are going to have an opportunity to shape what the new normal looks like. And our ability to shape what that new normal looks like comes down to our ability to tell our stories, to be very self-aware, to surround ourselves with people that make us better and people that know what we don't. And so my challenge to everyone that's watching this, challenge to my fellow alumni and those that are out there, is start with the baby steps. I like to use, the Bill Murray "What About Bob" movie, right? Like baby steps to the elevator, baby steps to video, baby steps to putting, to embracing this digital virtual world around us. But if we each start, there's baby steps, we each start putting ourselves out there, we each start telling our story. Not only is it going to help us, not only is it going to, connect us with people we never knew that we could connect with, but ultimately it's going to help each of us are going to do our part in changing the world and setting up what this new normal looks like. So I hope you take that challenge. I hope you will start taking action and putting yourself out there and embracing kind of this digital empathy mantra, because if we together can each do that and tell one more person, I truly do believe as we come out of this social distancing and we start to evolve into what this new normal looks like, we are going to shape the world like never before. And we're going to be able to prioritize what's important to us. We're going to be able to pay attention to those that are doing great things. So my name is Brian Fanzo, and I am the founder of iSocialFans. So if you want to follow me on social media, I am iSocialFans with a Z on every single channel. My website is brianfanzo.com. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have or anything that I can do on top of that. I don't know if you want to jump back in, Frank. There we go.
Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, feel free to write them down, write it in the Q&A box. If you actually want to come on the screen and talk, just raise your hand and I'll bring your video in, and you can ask Brian face to face. If you have.
Hey, look, I even brought, like, I have my old fraternity letters, which I had up here, and then this is the one, and I wish I had this is definitely a Radford shirt, as it's very holy, it's very 2003. But yeah, this was from my Radford hockey days. So I sleep with it with pride. So it's fun. I was excited to be a part of this.
Awesome. We really enjoyed having you with us. Thank you for getting us on your schedule. If anybody has any questions, feel free, jump in. If not, we can close this up here in just a few minutes. I'm going to put up next week's webinar. We're actually going back to yoga with Susie. I'm kind of in the way here, but it'll be next Friday. She'll be doing a nice soothing yoga next week for us, a nice 30-minute session. So come on back for that. If anybody has any questions, feel free to type them in.
Someone's raising their hand. Oh, Jason Miller's raising his hand.
Oh, I'll bring Jason in.
How about that?
If I can, where did I put my, oh, there he is. Jason, you'll have to turn your camera on. I can't control that.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. We cannot.
Yeah, I'm looking actually through my iPhone, so I might not be able to get the camera on. I don't know.
That's fine.
What's up,
We
Jason?
do a lot of. Oh, wait a minute. Hey, I'm in now, right?
There he is.
What's up, Brian? Man, it's good to see you. It was a great talk.
Good to see you as well. It's been a while.
What projects do you have coming up in the future other than the book?
So for me, my entire speaking business was disrupted. I lost 18 speaking gigs there in the beginning of March, and all 4 of my retainer clients kind of put things on hold. And so for me, I've pivoted into all virtual. So now I'm doing a lot of coaching and initiatives around virtual presentations, virtual speaking, doing some coaching in that space, and then really hosting and emceeing some events. So I'm working with a couple of big brands, Freddie Mac, SAP, helping to host their online events and hopefully do that side of the thing. So yeah, that's where, definitely a pivot for me. It's a pivot that made sense. For the last 5 years, I've been using virtual to build my offline business, and now I'm using virtual to build my virtual business.
Yeah, we've been teaching virtually for the last month or so, and we don't know when we're going to stop. And it's definitely been an adjustment to get people to really to buy into it and to be forthcoming with what they have to say. What tips would you have for educators as we have to, because obviously our kids are ahead of the curve when it comes to technology, their ability to use it. How can we more effectively reach maybe our next generation especially when you're with your marketing schemes too?
Yeah, so I think one of the things when we're thinking about that, it is difficult. And watching my 10-year-old and my 8-year-old and my 6-year-old get on Google and talking to their teacher, and I think one of the things that that change is like how do we make it more intimate, more real, and also understand the emotions that come with it, right? So like for me, I'm standing up when I'm giving this talk, right? Because it's very informative, very, I'm talking, kind of giving the direction. But, I have like a camera on the backside of here. When I do my more intimate conversations with clients or, a smaller group, it's very, hey, I'm sitting in a chair, I have the camera closer, I have a different background, kind of using some of those nonverbal, or verbal or things around us to kind of change that dynamic. And I also think, in this online classroom space, accountability is the big one, right? And it's not only holding people accountable, but bringing them on that journey. And I can imagine for you, that's a big one, right? That there is this tendency, and I know Frank said this when he's working from home, right? When you first work from home, it's like the freedom is amazing. And then all of a sudden you're working from home and you have this like epiphany that like, oh my God, I'm out of sight, I'm out of mind. Nobody knows what I'm doing. And so then all of a sudden you flip and you start working extra hard. So for most, and some of the people are probably going through this right now, right? All of a sudden you're working twice as hard because you're, hey, my work is always here, and you're trying to make up for that. And so one of those things I think is that kind of, not only being self-aware, but individual success as you start, and then, holding people accountable in this space of, I'm not going to tell you you have to, have your camera on every time, but I am going to tell you that you need to make this deliverable. And if you don't, there's going to be repercussions, right? Like, and that kind of thing. And because like, I remember when I first started working from home, like, I was that guy that I coded a program that moved my mouse every 3 seconds so that my Microsoft communicator was always active. I was the guy that everyone's now worried about, right? But like when we think about it, like there's also this mutual transparency, right? And so from especially from the education perspective, the more real and raw and like, hey, I'm learning this technology along with you, right? And as we're learning, I'm gonna share that ability to make it feel like, hey, you're not the only one that feels lost. You're not the only one that's disconnected. I think that's a big help. And little things with like conference rooms, rooms and such. managing expectations of what's expected of your students each time you turn on the video or each time they're turning on is extremely important, just like you would do in the classroom. And I've actually helped a couple of my daughter's teachers. Part of it's like, okay, hey everyone, I know everyone has something to say. We're gonna mute everyone. I'm gonna go around the room, and once I give you opportunity, share it. But try not like kind of really putting that out there, because there is this massive shift that we're going through right now, and part of that is when you feel like you're the only one going through it, you're a lot less likely to be accountable and be a part of it. But if you're willing to kind of shrink that distance, is what I call it, it can really make a difference in that, having that true dialogue between you and the students.
Thanks, man. It's great to hear from you. It's great to see you. Thanks for doing the webinar.
Yeah, man. Great to see you as well.
I'm going to bring on Ellen Taylor. Ellen works with our Center for Career and Talent Development. And so I'm going to bring her back in here, and she said she wanted to say something.
All right.
So.
I like it. See, there we go. We got people jumping in the chat. Thanks, Jason.
How are you? Great to see you, Brian. That was so amazing. So I work in the Center for Career and Talent Development, and my primary role is career coach. And I actually work with students in the Artist College of Science and Technology, so you would have been one of mine.
Wow.
And then also Chubbs, which Humanities and Behavioral Sciences are my two colleges. And I definitely remember you. I think when you were there, maybe I was an academic advisor at that point. I've been around the university forever, but yeah, but where do we, if we have any seniors on here right now, any people graduating in May, we probably, as you can hear from my voice, we are really trying to reach out to our seniors, because we know that they're graduating in a really tough environment. So any words of wisdom to them?
Yeah, I love that. And to me, that's I am happy to connect, and if people have questions, that are seniors or things that help out on that as well. It is definitely unique times and difficult times, but I would also argue it's times unlike anything else. Mm-hmm. And the idea of being able to have a story that starts in this kind of environment gives you a vehicle to build on as you move forward. And so I think a lot of it comes down to switching your perspective as a graduate. And if you watched the NFL draft last night, I thought that was very interesting, where every one of them had dreamed of walking the red carpet, and a little bit of that shifting and saying, my dream is still coming through. It's just coming in a different arena. And so I think that's a big piece of it. And I also think I'm a proud generalist, and throughout my career, people would tell me the riches are in the niches. And I'm a believer that if you have a niche, you should own it, you should double down, you should make it your full focus. But if you don't have one, like me, and you have had a career that was cybersecurity, data center, cloud computing, marketing, and now I speak on digital empathy. Can't get much more, and I played semi-professional poker somewhere in there as well. For me, if you don't have a niche, be okay with the fact that you don't have a niche. You're gonna have to do things a little bit differently, but you also have to be willing to be that Swiss Army knife of skill sets. Be willing to learn and constantly evolve. I can tell you, I have a notepad on my coffee table downstairs. Every Netflix show that I watch, I end up making a note about something like, wow, I loved how they told that story, or that camera view was really good, or I'll say, wow, the preview of the show was different than what the show was. They did a great job of marketing that. What was it about that show that brought me in? And I try really hard to take everything in my life. My daughters will ask, my daughters will ask me questions about the iPad or ask me something, and I'll start to think about that, like what can I learn from that scenario? And I think we have a tendency, especially getting out of a university and getting into that real world, was like, hey, I want to put to use everything I've learned. Well, times have changed. And I can tell everybody that's out there, like for me, when I left school, web design is what I thought I wanted to do. I was really excited about it. But when I left in 2003, web design had just transformed into kind of WordPress world that it was there. And so I was doing Flash and Fireworks. And when I went out there, every one of the jobs was like, we don't want that. And the people that had dropped out of school and not gone to school had got the experience that I had. And I had to make that adjustment of like, okay, what about web design was it that I loved? What about that thing that I was doing? And then how can I move that forward? And so I think that's a big piece. And then probably my biggest piece of advice is a lot of people will talk about their dream job or finding the job that, enlightens their passion. I don't believe, and this is something I wish I would have told myself back in 2003, 2005, focusing on trying to chase the dream job or only have the dream job is something that will really stretch you thin and can burn you out. But if you can find a way to be passionate about something, one part of what you're doing every single time, and enjoy the journey. Like, I found my dream job, it's speaking, and I want to do this for the rest of my life. But I wouldn't have the stories, the experience, the ways to connect with different generations. I even talk about college a lot. I was the president of the fraternity there at Kappa Delta Rho my sophomore year, and it had to get voted in. And I was like the young kid, and I remember, like, how do I relate with the juniors and seniors fraternity brothers? I was the assistant captain of the hockey team the same way. And funny enough, when I had built my biggest team, my 30th employee was the first employee that was younger than I was. Every one of them was older. And when I look back at my success on being great at that team, it was my ability to learn and be like, hey, I have no ego. If you guys have the experience, I'll do that. But if there's places I can learn. And so, like, my real advice is being willing to learn and adapt. And my career is full of pivots from U.S. government. I moved out to Arizona for a while, worked in the data center space. I got what I thought was my dream job. When I left college, my dream job was to be a technology evangelist. Guy Kawasaki did that for Apple. That's why I have all the Apple stuff here. That's why my handle is iSocialFans, the name of my company. And I really wanted to have that job, and I got that job, and I had the white picket fence, and I realized I spent all of my time thinking that job was my dream job, that I didn't realize how much I changed, how much the world had changed. And when I got there, I still wasn't where I was satisfied. And so I think although these times are different and it's definitely not what you pictured, you also have the opportunity to make something of it that none of us had the opportunity to do, right? And I think that's the kind of beauty. And shifting that perspective, it's tough. And I'm definitely not gonna say it's easy. And I've had plenty of down days throughout this, world that we're in right now. And I think it's okay, admitting that and kind of understanding that this is unprecedented. But as a dad, it's been tough not having the answers for my daughters. But at the same time, I believe the conversations we've had are richer than they've ever been before. Because I'm like, I don't know how we do this. And they're like, you didn't have a spring break that went into summer break? I was like, I would have probably liked it, but I know I didn't. And so yeah, I think it's an interesting time. And and I would love, if there's seniors that want to reach out and have advice. And I think this is also a perfect time to start telling your story and putting yourself out there, right? This is a time where people are looking for it. And for me, that's when I try to look through the coronavirus with like that different lens, it's that the world we're living in today is just proven that it doesn't matter where you live, what your job is, we are much more alike than we are different. And if you can remember that and you can put yourself out there, I think you can make the most of this situation.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. And Frankie, we're gonna you'll have this it'll be on videotape, right?
Yeah, we did record it. Yeah. So once we get it edited, it will end up on our website, and I'll actually have the video as well, so I can get it over to you.
Okay, that sounds awesome. So I'm going to send it out as a link to my students, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
And I really appreciate it. And I totally get it. I totally agree that I think, our students are the best. They're resilient, and they're going to be fine. So Joey Bell, hey, good to hear from you a second ago too. All right, take care. Thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. So I think that's everything right now, unless somebody else wants to jump in. I just want to thank everybody for joining us again. Join us next week for another nice yoga session. Brian, you're more than welcome to come back and join us for yoga.
All right. I like it.
And we will, like I said, we did record this, so we will put it up on our website once we get that side of the thing rolling. So thank you again. Thank you, Brian, for being here with us today.
Of course.
And until next time.
All right. Cheers.